I am here with Bernard Welt, who is an awesome IASD member. So, Bernard has a couple presentations in the Dream Study Group program, and he talks about the essential questions in relation to dreams and creativity. What is creativity? Are dreams creative thought? What evidence is there? And so, this is really important stuff. The Dreams in the Art series is an entire track as that is a part of the Dream Study Group program. So, you have two presentations, and one of them also talks about Midsummer Night's Dream. It's called What's in the Dream? A Midsummer's View. And this one shows us how dreams have offered opportunities for the arts to explore imaginative freedom and our capacity to change for the better. So I'd love for you to tell me a little bit about the Dreams in the Arts series and how your two presentations kind of fit into this category.
Yeah, thank you. You've already gone through a lot of it, which I would expect. I got interested in this kind of material, particularly because I started out teaching about dreams in an art school where I taught humanities to students of art, design, and photography. And they were great students for a dreaming class because not only were they interested in the subject, but they were good dreamers and they wanted to keep dream journals and they wanted to talk about their dreams with each other. So already I had a group almost like an experimental study group of people who were keeping track of their dreams while making artwork. And since I'm a poet myself and have been very interested in surrealism and other traditions like that are key to dreams and to the unconscious mind, I've always been interested in the relationship between dreams and creativity. Now, the expert, whom I'm glad to call a friend, is Dr. Deirdre Barrett, and she's written that great book, The Committee of Sleep, which gives lots of instances of how dreams suggest creativity. But sometimes Deirdre and I have a little bit of a quibble. Now, her background is in psychology, and she understands, I'm sure, a lot of things that I don't. But I've also done a lot of literary study. So every once in a while, I suggest that maybe one of the stories that we've heard about creativity and dreams might be a romantic tale that someone told. And we don't really have the evidence. And that's one of the places where I started thinking about creativity and dreams. Like, what do we actually know? One of the things that's easy to find out early on is that a lot of people will tell you that dreams and creativity are linked, that when they started keeping a dream journal or when they learned lucid dreaming, they became more creative. But then when you ask them to define creativity, what do you know about what you did that made it more creative? Very often, what they mean is they've been more productive. They've produced more things. And for that, my background in studying linguistics as an adjunct to studying literature and film was very helpful because I used the definitions that you find in linguistics for language. Productivity is the capacity to produce a lot of things. Creativity is the capacity to take things that you know and assemble them in new ways to form something genuinely new. And that is something that creative artists do. And it's something that I believe that dreams do. So, what we usually do with this kind of topic is examine the examples, and many of the examples are very famous. And we also think about the theories that people have of creativity in dreams. We go back all the way to the caves of Lascaux or Chauvet. And of course, we don't have those people in front of us to ask them, what were you thinking of when you made those drawings? But they're so fantastic and they so often resemble the forward progress of a dream narrative involving animals, hunting, daily activities of people who lived in those places. They seem so often connected to rituals, and we know that dreams have very often engendered forms of ritual in a lot of different kinds of societies, that anthropologists, archaeologists now speculate that these are dream-related images. So after that, of course, we have the stories that we find in the Bible and other scriptures and other religions. And in those cases, the inspiration is supernatural. It comes from a level of gods and deities and semi-deities. And that's how creativity in dreams is thought of. That is, it doesn't come from within. It's an inspiration from without. But then for a very long time, in the West anyway, dreams don't have a very good reputation. And they really only, especially in the age of reason, when people seek rational explanations for things, dreams are very often thought of as just sort of clutter in the mind that comes out while you're sleeping, absurdities, etc. We'll actually come back to that in talking about A Midsummer Night's Dream and beliefs in Shakespeare's time. But when we get to the Romantic period, the late 18th and early 19th century in the West, when there's a lot of rebellion against received knowledge, received wisdom, all of a sudden you see a whole generation of people taking dreams very seriously. And they are thinking of dreams as creative activity. That is, they begin to say the sort of things that you can find contemporary people in IASD saying now. I'm going to go to sleep and come up with something. And, as you know, some of them created artificial sleep through intoxicants. But for the most part, they're really talking about dreams, and they're writing down their dreams. They're making artwork based on their dreams. They're showing us dream images, all the sorts of things we also associate with modernism in the 20th century. So we come back to an issue that you'll hear me talk about more than once today. The idea in that it is very often artists who provide the inspiration for ideas in psychology. They show the way. If Freud weren't so interested in Shakespeare, if he weren't so interested in the whole history of literature, but particularly in the Romantic period, he wouldn't have been inspired to focus on dreams the way that he did. He liked to say that no one else was paying attention to them and that he discovered the meaning of dreams himself. But we know that there were many progenitors, there are many precedents that he was drawing upon. And the other thing that I think it's kind of important to focus on, you mentioned, finding definitions of creativity and focuses of creativity, ways of thinking about creativity that are actually helpful and productive, rather than being vague about it. Now, very often a term that has a broad or not entirely defined definition can be really helpful. It's sometimes helpful that people don't exactly say what they mean by art. It's sometimes helpful that people don't exactly say what they mean by spirituality. And it can be helpful. People don't exactly pin down creativity. But there are a few things about dreams that bring up the issues that Dr. Barrett brings up and that other people talking about creativity and dreams brings up that I think are really interesting things for people who do creative work and want to be inspired by their dreams to think about. One is, as we were saying about the essence of creativity, dreams do have that capacity to draw things from one's memories, one's thoughts, and recombine them in interesting ways. And everyone's noticed that since the beginning of serious study of dreams. Where are the memories in here? Where are your previous experiences? Why did you bring up this or that thing in a dream? What is something that's not all that familiar or important to you? What's it doing in your dream? And that leads to ideas about associative networks and why one thing links to another. And that makes us think that in dreams, people find creative ways to put together knowledge that they did not put together in their waking state. The most important thing about that, and again, I know there's psychologists who can talk about this in more detail, but it's still an area of very active study. The most important thing about that, in a way, is this creative thought something that's going on in our waking state that's just reflected in our dreams? Or are dreams actually the occasion for genuine creative work to come up, for new thoughts, new images, new ideas, new stories to come up? Now, if you want to go on anecdotal evidence, I don't know. I've heard literally thousands of dreams because I ran dream groups for students. And after that, I ran dream groups for other people. And then people will just tell you their dreams, right? Probably the same kinds of things happens to everybody who might listen to this because they say, I'm very interested in dreams. People will say to you, oh, I had a dream. But then one of the things that usually accompanies that is, and I don't know why I would have had this. I don't know where this stuff is coming from. And to some of us, maybe if we have a psychoanalytic bent, that sounds like some kind of denial. Like I'm starting out by telling you this isn't really me. It's just some weird thing that came into my head. But the thing that it is clearly pointing to is we don't really know where that stuff came from, and we don't know why it came together. But those who are interested in dreams think, well, actually, that's a really interesting thing about the mind, the way that stuff came together. Maybe the dreams are doing something that the waking mind finds itself unable to do. Another thing that people often bring up about creativity is dreams give us access to an unconscious mind. And that's where a lot of the material that is most important to us comes out. So a lot of people would put it like this: if we're doing problem solving in a dream, if we're coming up with new ideas in a dream, it may be because in the dream we allow ourselves to be very emotionally engaged with the material. And the emotions that it raises are right there and they become part of the associations. Whereas during our waking state, we may very often feel like, oh, that's just emotional material. It's not relevant to this great idea or this important scientific breakthrough. Finally, one of the things that people often bring up about creativity and dreams is the censorship, the sense, oh, that wouldn't work, the sense, oh, nobody will be interested in it, the sense that's absurd. All of that is turned off. So you actually allow yourself to think things that you wouldn't otherwise let yourself think in waking life. And that can include material from the unconscious, etc., material that you would have dismissed. But what it particularly points to is you get to reject the conventional view. And that's where inventiveness and creativity come from. So that's the gist of, I think, what people would hear if they went to the trouble of watching and hearing the entire presentation.
Wonderful. Yes. Thank you for sharing that. I think it's a really important perspective. I mean, dreams and, bridge the psychology, the art, the spirituality in such a beautiful way. So I think this is a really cool perspective that you have to offer. So I really hope that people sign up to the Dream Studies Group program. So when it comes to dreams and the arts, we know that there have been so many artists throughout history for ages that have used dreams, in their work and as a source of inspiration. So the Midsummer Night's Dream presentation, how does that fit into the picture?
Yeah, I mean, because so many presentations at IASD are from the standpoint of psychology as such, and because it makes a great deal of sense for psychologists to study dreams, sometimes, as with these dreams and the arts presentations, or rather the dream study groups on dreams and the arts, we may forget how important the arts have been in the history of ideas about dreaming. I think A Midsummer Night's Dream is a great example because it is perhaps the most produced of Shakespeare's plays. I haven't checked it out statistically, but it's a kind of play that junior high schools and high schools can put on, and every theater that does classics wants to do it. And that means if it's the most performed of Shakespeare's plays, it's the most performed play, period, because there's nothing that people go back to like Shakespeare. It's a play that very unusually puts dream right in the title. But for anyone who's seen even one production or read it in high school or whatever, you recognize that it doesn't necessarily present itself as a dream. The author is telling us through the title that it's a dream. People talk about dreams. At least one of the characters has a dream that she reports. But it immediately sets before us the analogy between play and dream, and it makes us think not only about plays and their capacity to represent dream-like things, but also dreams and how they can be very much like a play. And it's a very long time before somebody in psychology says, why don't you think about a dream as if you're watching a play or even as if you're watching a film? And think about it in the way that you would think about such an artistic production. So it's a very good play for testing that idea that a play is like a dream and a dream is like a play, and that the same principles can be applied to looking at each. From this play, from its dialogue, and from the dialogue in other plays, we just know that Shakespeare was very interested in dreams. I don't say that we can see inside somebody's mind, but it just comes up so often. One of the exchanges that's very famous is in Romeo and Juliet. And I have to look at the text for just a moment. Yeah. So some of you may remember that Romeo has a very good friend named Mercutio, and they sort of play fight with each other. They play little pranks and tell little jokes on each other. Romeo says to Mercutio, I dreamed a dream tonight. And Mercutio answers, so did I. Romeo, well, what was yours? Mercutio, that dreamers often lie. And Romeo answers, in bed asleep, where they do dream things true. So they go back and forth, but it's very evident through that play and through others that Shakespeare is actually very interested in these two opposing views, that dreams are nonsense, and that he even goes so far essentially to say that they are wish fulfillment, that they're just airy fantasies that people have. Whereas Romeo says, pay attention to your dreams. There might be something very important coming to you. We know a fair amount about how Shakespeare's contemporaries looked at dreams, and we know from the plays that he was aware of these various theories, that dreams are mere absurdities, that dreams are symptoms of a physical or psychological disorder, and that sometimes the dream is accompanied not only by the portrayal of that disorder, but also suggestions for how to heal it. That comes from ancient Greek knowledge and the way that people in the Renaissance went back to ancient Greece. So you still find people in Shakespeare's period following some of those instructions that we get from Artemidorus back in, I think, the 2nd century CE, where somebody who had a dream about a particular illness might be told to abstain from meat for a month and then come back and try again and see if they're better. People saw them as spontaneous productions of concern about private or public issues. So that's, in a way, very much like moderns think of dreams. And in particular, sometimes they thought about dreams as divinely inspired and sometimes demonically inspired. So you still find people in Shakespeare's period, which is roughly the reigns of Queen Elizabeth and King James I of England, you still find people saying that occasionally there is a dream that comes directly from God or even from one of the angels. But usually it's someone like James I himself. It has to be someone of such importance that they have a direct pipeline. Now, Shakespeare doesn't seem to be that interested in that theory. Where he seems to be interested in the dream is all the stuff that comes up in the play that comes up in people's dreams. In other words, he uses the play to sort of display how dreams would deal with these themes that are bothering people. One of them, for example, it's very important in Midsummer Night's Dream for anybody who remembers the marriage theme and how it starts with somebody who wants to get married, but her father forbids it. That theme of the social order versus the individual's desire for autonomy, for direction of their own destiny, comes up in dreams all the time. And I would say we don't always notice that it comes up in dreams. On the same on the same theme, let's say. Okay, start again. On the same theme, the order of the family versus personal autonomy. That is, everybody feels in Shakespeare's period, at least, everybody feels at some level a desire to do as the family wishes us to do, to be part of that family, to have a place that you come from. But it doesn't take long before in adolescence people find, and they found in Shakespeare's time as much as in our own, people find that they need to break out from the family for certain aspects of life. A lot of people aren't aware of this, but in Shakespeare's time, marriages were not very often arranged, only in the nobility, only in the aristocracy. In general, a woman was expected to have choice in who she married. And so people are already aware of this kind of conflict. There's also the relation of gender roles to individuality. You have in Shakespeare's plays women saying over and over again, why should I be forced to do X or Y or Z just because I'm a woman? Do I not have the same talents as the males around me? And we have famous examples of that in some of Shakespeare's characters. All of these dream themes come up in the play and in other plays of Shakespeare's. Midsummer Night's Dream displays themes that you find in dreams. For example, someone dreams of being threatened by a serpent. Once again, it's nightmares very often that come up. Themes of rejection and of sexual threat, of someone being pursued against their will. There's even a scene early on where someone is condemned to death. And one of the reasons that we can sort of see that this is a dream theme is it doesn't really make any logical sense. It's not appropriate to the situation. And that's very often a key to when we're seeing something that comes from the unconscious mind that is expressing a fear or a desire. And then there are common incidents from dreams that occur in A Midsummer Night's Dream. There are the fairies, the magical creatures that show up and that magically make things happen that otherwise would make no sense at all. However, the whole of the play is built on symbols that occur very often in dreams. And we're just assuming that Shakespeare, who was uh, very much an acknowledged fan of Geoffrey Chaucer and of some of the other great poets of his time. We don't know how many languages he read, but it wouldn't have been at all unusual for somebody in Shakespeare's time to find Chaucer's Middle English from a couple centuries earlier very comprehensible. We know that he admired a lot of the ancients who bring up dream themes and write about dreams, and he quotes from a couple of them. Most importantly, though, what stands out about Midsummer Night's Dream, in contrast to much of the work in Shakespeare's own time, and one of the reasons why people in his own time saw him as a rebel, the whole business of did Shakespeare write Shakespeare's plays is really quite odd because there's so much contemporary testimony of people talking about him and his plays and themes in them. They took them very seriously. So one of the things that they're thinking about is the way that Shakespeare shows that the imagination can make a great change in people's lives. This is really the one play where we see people go through experiences. Actually, I should withdraw that. It is one of the few plays of Shakespeare where we see people go through experiences that are essentially imaginative experiences, things that change the way that they think about things. And they go into the woods at night and they have these odd experiences and they come out changed. And they're changed for the better. They get along better with each other. They resolve their conflicts with each other. The sexual threats are removed and turned into sexual happiness. And they come back to the world ready to face the world that they felt exiled from. The people who were posing a threat to them in the external world of Athens, as Shakespeare portrays it, are now reconciled to them. So this is one of the great examples of a literary work or a work for the stage or a work in the arts that promotes the idea that in fact something that is a dream or looks like a dream can change your life. And one of the reasons that we know that Shakespeare saw it that way is that when these people wake up in the woods and determine to go back to Athens, they say, we'll go back and we'll tell them about this dream we had. So they refer to their experiences as a dream. I want to tell very quickly a little story. I was in Santa Cruz with my sort of mentor in dream things, Kelly Bulkley, at one of the very early IASD conferences for me in the early 21st century. And I think most of us did not know that Santa Cruz Shakespeare was going on, a well-established outdoor Shakespeare set of performances sponsored by the University of California at Santa Cruz. So we're taking a walk afterwards and we're heading towards the woods and we come over a hill. And at that moment, we look down the hill and we see the stage. And they're doing a production of Midsummer Night's Dream. And I swear, we came in just at the moment. We heard these people say, let us go back to Athens and tell these people our dream. And we all just sort of like looked at each other like these things do happen at IASD conferences. It's synchronicity, it's fate, it's whatever. But it was a really, really wonderful moment. I'll always remember.
That's so cool. I love when those perfectly aligned moments happen. It just feels
Yeah.
like that moment was just perfectly created, like, for those people. And yeah, I think that's super awesome, super powerful. It's really cool how Shakespeare's work is filled with dream imagery, and it's like he's intuitively figured out, things about dreams that modern researchers have been studying, and he figured it out ages ago. So, how dreams are a source of inspiration and transformation, creativity, self discovery, and lucid dreaming, too. I mean, theater can teach us a lot about dreaming and lucid lucid dreaming. So I really appreciate you bringing that perspective, teaching me something new, and hopefully the listeners as well. And yeah, we will check you out at the 2025 IASD conference, as well as the Dream Study Group program, which has 4 different series. In addition to Dream and the Arts, there's the Foundation series, the Research, and Dream and Ethnicity series. So all of them are important and give us a well-rounded view about dreams. So thank you for that, and hopefully I'll see you there.
Thank you. I've really appreciated my opportunity to participate in the Dream Studies Group program as well as present at conferences.